One of the most common debates that I often see in the aiming community is what the best muscle group for aiming is, whether or not it's arm aiming, wrist aiming, or fingertip aiming. The answer to that debate on what the best muscle group to aim with is actually to use all three muscle groups. Because if you use all three muscle groups, you'll be able to reach the highest mastery possible in aiming. So therefore, you should actually be strengthening all three muscle groups when you're aim training on Kovacs. Practicing your aim is actually the same thing as going to the gym to build your physique, because you don't want to only go to the gym to do bench presses, right? If you go to the gym and only do bench presses, you'll only work out your chest. You won't be working out the rest of your body. So you'll just be walking around with a big old chest and then nothing else. Everything's like tiny as fuck. So therefore, aiming is actually the same thing. You want to work out your hands, your wrists, and your fingers, right? So when you're playing Kovacs, you want to strengthen all three of those muscle groups and find a balance of how much to utilize of each muscle group for whichever whichever cursor movement you're trying to make in the game. That's the reason why people say to never change your sensitivity, is because if you're using a higher sense, you're most likely utilizing your wrist more, right? So if you have a high sense and you're using your arm to move around like this, like that's gonna make like a huge like rotation on your in-game camera, right? So that's the reason why higher sense players use their wrist to aim, is because they need to make smaller mouse movements. So the issue is that when you go from high sense to low sense, what's gonna happen is that you won't have the developed muscle skill needed to make the same amount of movement on your in-game camera as you did on high sense. So say that I try to flick to the target on my left on high sense, right? It's just gonna look like this. I'm just going to be moving my mouse like left. I'm just gonna be rotating it left with my wrist, right? But if I lower my sense, what's gonna happen is that instead of rotating my wrist just a little bit to the left, I have to rotate it even more like this to hit that target. So that's the reason why that you see yourself freezing your wrist a lot, like your wrist locking up, is because in Overwatch you probably played on a higher sense, right? And then Valorant you probably went lower sense. So what actually happened is that you don't have the developed muscle skill or muscle memory, I guess you'd call it, to make that certain adjustment. So that's why you have to place. That's why you have to strengthen like every single muscle group on your body, or not in your body, just every single muscle group used for aiming. And there are certain Kovacs scenarios that I can recommend to fix like a lot of bad habits. I would actually have to see how you aim, but one neat trick that I developed or that I kind of use to like rebalance my aim with how much utilization of each muscle group to use when I aim whenever I change sensitivities, is that I'll go into Kovacs and I'll start aiming with only pointing my mouse straight like this, right? So let me demonstrate. So usually when you're tracking a target, you're using your wrists a lot, right? You're rotating your mouse like this. And if you lower your sense, you might move your arm and then rotate your wrists at the same time. But when you change your sense, like that's gonna throw like how much each muscle group to use, and it's gonna throw everything off balance completely. And that's why like it takes 2 whole weeks to kind of relearn a new sense, unless you already developed mastery in every single muscle group used for aiming, which is your wrists, your hand, and your arm. So a neat trick that I developed to kind of rebalance everything on how much muscle utilize on how much you should utilize each muscle group is by playing Kovacs, but only keeping your mouse forward, like still like vertical, and never rotate it like this. Just keep it vertical the entire time. So when you're tracking a target, look at how my wrists, look at how my mouse moves. Like I'm just gonna show it like this. Look at how my mouse moves. I'm never rotating it, right? Meanwhile, if you aim normally, it's gonna look something like this. It's gonna rotate a lot, and that's gonna take a really long time to kind of master. It might actually take like 2 or 3 months because I don't know. It's like it's more complex to aim like this versus aiming like this, pointing your mouse straight. So a cool technique that I developed to kind of find a rebalance of like everything is to play callbacks and only keep your mouse pointing forward like this while you're aim training. And when you're playing Valorant, you don't have to worry about doing this all the time on Valorant, but only when you aim train because when you do this, it's gonna force you to use your arm, your wrists, and your I guess not your I guess your fingers if you're trying to make micro adjustments, but right now we're more focused on wrist and arm. But what this is going to do is this is going to force you to use your arm and your wrist at the same time while you're aim training. Whereas if you weren't using this technique and you were just aiming how you usually aim, you'd just be going like this and going like this and going like this and going like this to like aim left and right? And you would never be strengthening or utilizing like the muscle coordination on your arm. You would never be utilizing your arm movement when you're training Kovacs. So a really good way to find a rebalance of how much you should utilize each muscle group is just by keeping your mouse straight while you're aim training. Just by keeping your mouse straight. Don't rotate your mouse like this when you're aim training. Just keep it pointing forward and just aim like this. And by doing this, you're gonna use your wrists, right? Look at my wrist. My wrist is moving, right? Just by keeping the mouse straight, I have to move my wrists. Like it's not a lot, but I still have to move it. And I'm not straining my wrists at all because like I don't have to do this or this or this. It's kind of like it's like completely balanced. Like I don't have to move my wrists like too far right or too far left to make this huge swipe right here. You see it? I don't have to like overstrain myself. And also, I'm also using my arm, right? It's like the complete perfect balance. I'm using my arm and my wrist, and I'm not straining anything at all. And all I have to do is just keep my mouse straight, pointing forward like this while I'm training on callbacks. And yeah, that's that's basically it. That's basically how you rebalance how much muscle utilization you should use for each muscle group when you're aiming, especially when you change sense. And that's also how like you'll improve aiming in the long run. It's just by training every single muscle group. But yeah, that's it. Anyways, you should definitely try that out. Um, you'll find that you won't stress your wrist as much, and you'll start using your arm. Because I think you kind of get lazy if you're used to high sense going to low sense. Like you'll sometimes forget to move your arm a lot. That's the reason why like you find yourself locking up. So yeah, just play Kovacs like maybe like an hour a day, and be aware of how your mouse is positioned at all times. And just try to keep your mouse pointing forward, vertical at all times. Don't rotate or do any of this motion. Like don't rotate your mouse at all on your mouse pad. Just keep it forward. Go left and right like this. And just let your body, your muscle, and your arm and your wrist and everything, just let it like naturally do its own thing. And yeah, just train like that on callbacks. But when you're actually playing Valorant, like you don't have to worry about any of that stuff, keeping it straight or anything. You don't have to worry about keeping it straight or anything because when you're training like this on callbacks, it's going to naturally play into factor of how your natural aim is going to be like in game on Valorant. And you'll still be doing like this and stuff on Valorant, but it's gonna be like perfectly balanced when you play in game. But yeah, you'll see what I mean after you try this for like a few days. But that should help a lot. Anyways, yeah.